Welcome to the Box Jumper Podcast, episode number 9. I'm your host, John Sainamond. For this episode, I am joined by registered dietitian Laurie Jackman, a former neighbor of mine and a friend for many years. She's also a TV personality with a regular segment on nutrition, all part of CTV Morning Live in Atlantic, Canada. Now, I've had nutrition on my radar for a topic for a while, and I've shied away from it for a bit because I know that it's a weakness in my own daily routine. It's not that I eat badly, but I don't actively plan for dietary success either, and I feel like I should. So I finally decided to take the plunge and connect with Laurie to see if she might be interested in coming on the podcast and talking shop, and she was happy to share. No matter what your interest in fitness, it's clear from my chat with Laurie that one of the smartest things you can do is invest some time in planning your diet wisely and personalizing it to your specific needs, whether that's everyday life or fueling fitness routines with intensity. So for this episode, let's talk food, fuel, energy in for energy out. Your daily performance depends on what you do in the kitchen. In 10 seconds, I'll chat with registered dietitian Laurie Jackman as we talk about the fact that what comes out is in fact dependent on what goes in. Interpret as you will. Thanks for joining me. I'll start by asking you to just tell me who you are and what it is that you do.
Okay, so my name's Laurie Jackman. I am a registered dietitian here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. I work full-time for Sobeys as a community dietitian, and I supervise Nova Scotia. And on the side, I do a segment on CTV Morning Live for the past about 18, 19 years on nutrition recipes and tips.
Yeah, for those of you that are watching TV early in the morning, that's when you'll catch Laurie on the air.
That's right. Every second Wednesday, I have a segment. So yeah, I absolutely love that. It's a huge passion.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So the reason that well, first of all, you're the first person that I knew very well that I thought, hey, I know a dietitian if I want to talk about diet, particularly when I'm a little self-conscious about the fact that I know jack about the diet side of things. You were the first person that I thought of to invite on the podcast. So
thank you.
Thanks for being the guinea pig and coming on to educate me. If no one else listens to this episode, at least I'm getting the benefit of talking to you. But hopefully there'll be some other people out there, particularly in the CrossFit world and the fitness world, that will be able to benefit from your knowledge. And they may even wind up emailing me questions after the fact. So
awesome.
I'll pass those along if I do get them.
Love that.
So for starters, my interest is in trying to find sort of a plug and play method of getting my diet to work for what my priorities are in CrossFit. So for me, I'm not a performance athlete, but I'm not in it really for weight loss either, because I'm kind of in the right zone as far as that's concerned. It's really more about like day-to-day fitness and performing well in the workouts that I'm challenged with every day, and they're constantly varying. And so, the biggest challenge that I've had is having the energy to get through a workout because I choose to work out first thing in the morning.
Right.
So what are some of the things that people need to know about, what time of day is intake of food going to affect performance, and what role does that play in your energy level through the day? Not just for working out, but all of us have jobs and we have activities, and we're up in the afternoons or in the evenings out with our kids, taking them all over the place. So we've got a long day ahead of us. How do we feed our need for energy through the day?
It's tough. So, okay, if we talk about activity, so sometimes when we think about working out, there's a couple of components we need to look at here. So yes, we can talk about what we eat right before a workout, and ultimately eating, an hour before a workout is great. But sometimes, as you say, you're not going to get up at 4.
Tough to get a full meal in at 5 a.m. Yeah.
Right. Nor sometimes we don't perform well sometimes when that happens if we're a morning workout person. So what's more important is that you're well fueled all the time. I know, John, we're going to talk about different types of diets, but if we talk about athletic performance, we know that carbohydrate is the main source of energy to our muscles and to our brain. And that's what affects performance. So we have to be choosing the right types of carbs, but most of the time we need to have a diet that is, at least half of our calories are coming from carbohydrate. Right. You can certainly modify this. I'm not saying that's the be all and end all. And full disclosure, I'm not a sports nutritionist or dietitian, and you can get people that are more, well-versed in this area if you want some really specific guidelines. And this is a science. Yeah. So I would absolutely recommend your listeners, if they're heavy into this, definitely get the expert advice. I can give you absolutely general advice here today. So let's go back. For the most part, a diet that's predominantly carbohydrates. So what does that look like when we're eating? Mm-hmm. So you always follow the healthy plate. So I have it here, but I know your listeners can't see me here, but I will explain this. Yeah. So, your plate, 9 inches in diameter, half of it being vegetables, a quarter of it being that whole grain, and a quarter of it being protein. Mm-hmm. This is a plate method of eating. And this is something that I think you're going to see our country go to. So, because our food guide is being changed, we're going to see it in December. Dietitians love to talk about the food guide, and we kind of get the eye roll, and I totally get that. But there has to be some way for us to verbalize, how do you eat, right? And this is really combining macronutrients. So we're getting that combination of carbohydrate, fat, and protein, right? Mm-hmm. So to your question, if I'm well-fueled all the time, I'm feeding my body. Where's the science behind feeding your body every 3 to 4 hours? Well, there's not. We need to play with blood sugar level. We need to keep our blood sugar level consistent. And that's where you need to work one-on-one with somebody. Right. So if you're working out hard at 6 a.m. for an hour, well, we need to look at if you're going to get enough calories. You definitely need to be eating right after that, some carbohydrate and protein. So this is different for everybody. Yeah. But well-fueled all the time, at least 3 meals looking like our plate method, and then, snacks on top of that if you're a highly active person.
Right.
Yes. And hydration. So, without monopolizing this conversation, but it's a long-winded answer, hydration is almost more important to your body, especially during a workout and all the time, than food. Yeah. So making sure that we're properly hydrated is so important for anybody doing any type of activity.
Right. What's a reasonable intake for, like, let's say you're doing an hour-long workout? Like the way that I approach it is, I've got a shaker bottle that's probably 750 milliliters or maybe a little bit more. That's what I take with me to the gym, and it's gone by the end of the workout.
That's great.
And that's pretty much my consistent pattern throughout. That's an hour worth of activity, or give or take, with setups and teardowns and stuff. Yes. But for me, it's also, in my case, I put BCAAs in my water, so that I'm getting just a little bit more than just water. But certainly the hydration is the biggest component of that.
It is. It absolutely is. So we say, a good general rule of thumb, 2 cups of water 2 hours before activity. Mm-hmm. And again, depending on the time we're working out, that may not be possible, but we're well hydrated all the time. Right. 2 cups of water every hour of activity, and 2 cups of water after activity. And if your activity is lasting more than an hour, that's when you really need to look at replacing electrolytes. So that's when we can get into sports beverages, sports gels, and depending on how hard you're working out and kind of the conditions. So if we're working out in hot and humid conditions, you might need to look at that too. Right. So there's different ways that we can test hydration levels, and sometimes it's through weighing before and after activity. Mm-hmm. And there's a percentage of body weight if you lose, then you may need to looking at rehydrating better. So those are things that would definitely be discussed on an individual level with somebody. But again, if you're feeling really bagged in your workout and you're losing energy quickly, those are good signs that something's not quite right, whether it's hydration, which is a lot of the times, or it's, you're losing your glycogen stores really quickly, and they're not topped up before we start our workout, so we don't have the sustainable energy to get us through, right? Yeah. So one point of discussion that I wanted to bring to you, and I apologize for not sharing with this with you before we met, was the early part of Fitness in 100 Words, as written by Coach Greg Glassman, who founded CrossFit. Starts out with a recipe relating to nutrition. Because, anybody that's in CrossFit, to some extent, addresses nutrition one way or the other, and this speaks to it rather loudly. And it starts out with eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. Keep intake to levels that will support exercise but not body fat. And then it goes on to talk about all the various different activities and exercises that you should work on from functional fitness. Right. But that's the only part that really addresses the nutritional component of athletic performance. And it's interesting because it first of all, the most glaring omission from that is
the absence of sugar is, I mean, it's deliberately attacking sugar, and that has since become a passion of Greg Glassman's with his crusade against the big soda industry.
Right.
But it also doesn't specifically, it doesn't mention carbs as a separate component. I mean, I guess in a way it does, because it nuts and seeds, I don't know if that's really intended to include grains at all either.
Right.
But how would you say that recipe equates to something that makes sense for somebody doing a high intensity sport like CrossFit?
I mean, okay, so if I'm being totally honest, I don't love that statement, because we have to look at food whenever we say avoid. Mm-hmm. So he's saying avoiding starch. So to me, as a dietitian, that means grains. That means all starch. That means whole grains, right? That's what I would include as starch, right? Okay. So I don't believe that, and I don't believe people need to avoid. And
it's not avoided, it's little starch.
Little,
so as a proportion anyway, it seems like it's de-emphasized compared to, the staples of meat, vegetables, nuts, and seeds.
Right. So the other issue I would have with it is, okay, meat. So absolutely great source of protein. But, there is also plant sources of protein. And as we know that are well researched with the Mediterranean diet, they support, reduced incidence of chronic disease. So I think it's a little broader, but I think, you absolutely can work within what he's saying.
Right.
So I think, okay, let's bring it back to evidence-based messaging. Mm-hmm. So if I look at any guidelines, so dyslipidemia guidelines, Diabetes Canada guidelines, what we're now saying, which is absolutely interesting, is people have to find something that they can stick to and adhere to. Mm. That is what we need to recommend. So whereas before we would say, yeah, Mediterranean diet, lots of research around it. There's lots of research around vegetarian, a way of eating. Mm-hmm. But now we're saying, paleo can fit. Keto, definitely more research needs to be done there, but we have to work with our clients. And in the end, if you can't adhere to a pattern of eating, it's not going to fix anything.
Right.
So that's from a chronic disease management perspective. But if we look at your listeners, so are we doing CrossFit for weight management? Are we doing it, just to feel better and be healthy? And that all has to do with nutrition as well. So if I can't find an eating pattern that I can stick to and adhere to and it makes sense to me, it's not going to work, right? So
yeah, and CrossFit is a big homogenous kind of audience too.
Right.
There's people that have very different goals from another chunk of people that have different goals from another chunk of people. So it's definitely hard to generalize like one particular methodology working for everybody, because their sensibilities and their priorities and how it fits their daily lives will be very different one from the next.
That's right. And that's nutrition.
Yeah.
What's going to work for you is not going to work for me, is not going to work for Al, is not going to work for Susan, right?
Yeah.
So we really need to individualize an approach. We need to be sensible about it. And then we need to look at, a whole other thing about nutrition is eating behaviors, right? Which needs to be addressed, and I don't think gets addressed. So it's all of these things together. So, sugar, let's talk about that for a second. He's right. Absolutely. Sugar is now linked to cancer, to diabetes, to heart disease. So we need to get this in check. But, where is the number one contributor of sugar in our diets? It's sugar-sweetened beverages.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the pop, it's the juices, it's the beverages, it's the energy drinks that we need to really, be mindful of.
Yeah, a lot of people, they reach into the fridge and they see, whether it's a can of Coke or a package of orange juice, and they reach for the orange juice thinking that it's healthier. And it's got some healthy components to it, but it also has some massively unhealthy components to it. The amount of sugar that's added to most juices is off the charts. It's the same thing with iced tea.
Right.
And people don't really necessarily realize that until they, flip it over and start looking at the nutritional information and realize just how chock-a-block full it is.
It is. And I think the confusion lies in, if it's 100% juice, well, there's no added sugar. It's all natural sugar.
Right.
But it doesn't really matter. And, are we really going to, think how many oranges it would take for you to squeeze a cup of orange juice.
Right.
Well, you're not going to sit down and eat 5 oranges, right? Plus, you're not getting the fiber. Right. Plus, there's something to be said for chewing food. That gives us a whole other, feelings and feelings of satiety, which is so important, right? Yeah. So I always like to say to my clients as well, remember the number one reason we eat. So do you know what the number one reason we eat is?
I don't know. I've always seen it as a bit of an obligation more than anything.
True,
It may not be the healthiest way to look at it, but yeah, I mean, like for me, I don't enjoy preparing food. So I just see it as kind of a nuisance. If I could open up a package and eat it, which, I mean, I've done that in the past, although it's never a package of something that actually has the kind of balance that you're supposed to have.
Right.
So, but to me, I would easily drink a shake for every meal because I just don't care. I mean, I appreciate going out every now and then, but it's the preparation that's the annoying factor for me.
It's tough, right?
Yeah.
So the number one reason we eat definitely to stay alive, but it's because it's there. Right. It's availability. So I always give people the, idea. So say if I had a bowl of Werther's here on the table, a candy, hard candy.
Right.
Would you take one? Sure you would. So would I. Yeah. But would we think of that candy before it was there? No. Right? So the number one reason we eat is availability. And once you can understand that, it changes your perception of food.
Right.
So when I open my fridge and I see things that maybe, I don't want to be eating all the time, right? I need to clean that up, right? I need to look at those things. What do I want to be filling my body with all the time? That's what I need to see in my cupboards, in my fridge.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the availability side of things. And, I mean, I've been self-employed for almost 20 years. And so food availability is it's always there. It's not just stuff's at my desk. I'm at home. I'm 20 feet from my kitchen. So, for at least for the first several years that I was working on my own, I probably had snacks periodically through the day, and that contributed to my not feeling the best and not having the kind of energy levels that I now, I guess, to a certain extent, take for granted, that I've been able to recover some of those energy levels by being as active as I have been for the last several years with the CrossFit community.
Right.
But that's a major thing. And I've worked inside offices that have snacks available for people as well. And some offices have a really healthy approach to the snacks that are made available to staff, and others don't. And so that availability has got to become a factor for a lot of them too. And the discipline that it takes to not pick up, the donut or the muffin or some other high fat or high sugar food that happens to be lying around is tough.
And I believe it has nothing to do with discipline or willpower or anything. It's human nature. If it's a food that I want, that even if I don't want it, it's there, I'm going to eat it.
Right.
So you have to remove that for people. So we did get rid of the candy dish in our office, I'm happy to say, and I wasn't liked for a few weeks, but people got over it. But you notice it's a change, right? Because whenever we eat things like that, and this is where we get into that sugar talk or that processed food or food that doesn't make us feel good. Especially sugar like that, it spikes our blood sugar. We crash, we crave more sugar. We get into this vicious cycle of always wanting more. And you can't get control anymore. So it's to remove those, and they're barriers really, right? And just to teach people that it has changed people's lives. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like buffet eating, right? Think about that. When you're at a buffet, it is impossible to choose, I think, for the most part, a well-balanced meal because the food is there. We just want more. And there's tons of research around this. So it's really interesting. But the more you're aware, the more you can change behavior.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, there's a certain amount of effort that I think everyone would have to put into educating themselves about how to eat.
Definitely.
And as an adult, your opportunity to learn that stuff on your own, because it's not forced on you. You're not in school anymore. So there's no structure to the learning process for an adult to understand how the nutrition market has changed and the understanding of what you're supposed to eat and the proportions and the different metabolic pieces of the puzzle that you're supposed to put together for performance have changed over the years.
Well, this is it. Nutrition is a science. It's constantly changing. It's really a struggle to work in this profession sometimes because we're up against people that, quite frankly, have no background, are looking to sell a product. This is the thing. If I give you advice and it's not sound advice, you can sue me, right? I'm liable for the information I give. I have to be evidence-based all the time. That's why if you are putting that much effort into, a fitness program or anything to improve your health, you should talk to someone about your eating plan too, right?
Yeah.
They really go hand in hand, and it has to be individualized. Everybody's different, right? Everybody's so different, depending on when you work out, depending on how you feel after you eat, depending on how you want to combine foods, right? But those basic components of the healthy plate that we talked about, looking at getting protein and fiber at each meal is extremely important because they help to stabilize blood sugar and keep you full longer, right? Whether you need snacks or not, that's an individual thing. Some people do, some people don't.
The personalization of nutrition planning is certainly something that in my circle within our CrossFit community, I've seen the evidence that it really makes a significant difference.
Right.
There's a lot of people at the gym that are working with nutrition professionals to figure out how best to eat to achieve their goals, and a lot of them have very different goals. I mean, we've got weightlifters that are trying to fuel performance, and it's explosive performance. So that has a different sensibility than a CrossFitter that has to be able to sustain energy for 10 or 20 or even 30 minutes at a time in these short, intense intervals. And then you've got other people that are not really particularly interested in performance. They're trying to fuel weight loss. And so they've got a very different approach to that. The one example that I cited to you when you arrived is my buddy Gareth at the gym. He lost over 100 pounds. And CrossFit helped get him there, and the community kind of rallied around him to make sure that he felt supported. But really what made a very significant difference for him was an individualized diet.
Right.
And in his case, he did a variant on ideal protein because I guess the regular ideal protein diet wouldn't support the kind of level of activity that CrossFit normally entails. So he had a slightly different version of that. But that is something that really made a big difference to the way that he was performing in class, and as a result, his weight loss really accelerated dramatically. And so, it really makes a big difference. And then you see other athletes that have performance in mind or muscle mass in mind, and so they have a completely different approach to nutrition, but it's personalized to them. So they're really starting to see results. How much of a participant do you have to be in that planning process? If I wanted to go to a nutritionist and say, here's basically what I do over the course of a day. How do I fuel that?
Right.
Do I have the capacity to ask the right questions in order to help the nutritionist figure that out, or is the nutritionist going to draw that information out of me anyway?
I think both, yes. So you have to be definitely providing, a food record to see what you're doing now, and then are you getting the results that you're hoping for? So where are we lacking? If it's a weight management issue, if it's an energy issue, if it's blood work, right? I'm low in iron, or low in B12. Who knows?
Right.
It could be anything, right? So yes, and then we are trained to help kind of ask the right questions and kind of figure out, this doesn't look quite right, or your strength training, you need way more protein than you're getting. That's usually not the case, but I just give you an example, right? Or you're not getting enough fluid, right, for your size and your activity level. So,
well, I know the one time that we did a nutrition challenge at the gym was through another nutrition program that was run online. And the one thing, I never really got my macro ingredients balanced quite the right way, but the one thing that was a glaring issue for me is I wasn't taking in enough calories.
Interesting, isn't it?
To me that seemed a little backwards. I was still able to perform in class. I wasn't running out of energy. But I wasn't really seeing any performance gains, nor was I seeing any body proportion changes, because I was looking for a fat reduction while improving my performance.
Right.
And that wasn't happening. And there was a post maybe a month or two later, I can't remember exactly when, but Brent Fikowski, one of the biggest CrossFitters in the world, posted a photo of himself from the games in, I think it was 2016. And underneath it was how many calories he was taking in at the time. And then it was something like, 4,000 or something like that. It was a lot, easily twice as much as I was taking in. And then the next photo was himself ridiculously huge and even more shredded. And underneath was even more calories per day.
Right.
And that blew my mind. It didn't really occur to me that you could fuel yourself that way and still get those kind of performance gains.
Definitely.
So how does that work? How can you take in more calories and I mean, I get the idea that more calories mean more muscle, but how do you also wind up getting more shredded at the same time? Because I thought the idea of muscle mass going up and body fat going down at the same time didn't work.
Right. There's so many components here. So sometimes when we don't eat enough, our body won't run properly, right? So it reminds me of the example. I had a client who came to me for weight loss. Mm-hmm. And I looked at his meal plan. I said, "You're not eating enough." And he said, "There's no way. I'm not eating more." So he had a fear of food, which was really interesting. Mm. And anyway, I said, "I will refund your money if you don't lose weight. But I can tell you right now, you're not eating enough." Anyway, he followed the advice I gave him, and that's exactly what happened. He lost weight. He was amazed. But it's almost like your body doesn't hoard food, right? So if I don't give my body the right amount of calories for the activities that I'm doing, it just won't efficiently burn those calories because it knows that it's not going to get fed. It's very smart, right? But when I fuel it properly, and the right fuel is so important, right? So we can fuel ourselves with all kinds of different types of food, but I'm sure the example that you gave of this gentleman, the CrossFitter, he's fueling himself with the right foods, right? It makes a huge difference on how it's utilized. So give us a bit of an insight to why sometimes we need more calories when we do more activity. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes we have to be careful because sometimes when we start to get more active, our metabolism revs up and we get more hungry. Right. And then sometimes if you start eating the wrong calories, because you think, "Oh, I'm working out, I can have, well, I don't know, we'll pick on chips." I always pick on chips, right? We can have chips or with this and that. Well, the amount of calories in those chips really was never going to maybe equate to what you just burned off. So it really depends. You have to sometimes choose the right things after to make sure that we're getting that glycogen uptake back into the muscle. So that we're refueling those stores and that affects performance the next time again. So that is, again, so individualized, right? And that's where you really got to work with somebody one-on-one to figure those things out. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a couple selfish questions at the moment. Because I work out at 6 a.m., I don't have the ability to have a full breakfast in the morning prior to a workout. Right. I tend to get some fuel afterwards, but not much before. Right. My habit has been to get up and maybe have a small thing of yogurt and a banana or something to have a little bit of solid food in me, but
that's good.
There's really not much else going on there because I found if I tried to eat too much beforehand, it didn't sit well, depending on what the workout was. Right. And so I wound up having to cut back a little bit on what my expectations were for how much to get in. Because, I'm up at 5, I might be finished eating by 5:20, 5:30, and then by the time 6 o'clock rolls around, the WOD has started. Right. So I don't have a lot of time for that to settle either. So what are some foods that make sense for somebody that's in that position to try to get into their system to both, I guess it's not a matter of aiding performance because it's not going to digest in that amount of time, but what's a reasonable food to try to get in so that you're not trying to work out with an empty stomach?
Right. So I have clients that do work out on an empty stomach. I mean, it's not optimal, but again, everybody's different. Yeah. But the foods that would be optimal for you are foods that have a higher carbohydrate value. So like your banana is a great choice. Mm-hmm. That little bit of protein that's in your yogurt does help to anchor that carbohydrate. So you don't just get like a surge of blood sugar. It kind of helps to stabilize that blood sugar so that it lasts you a little bit longer. Right. What you don't want to see in that meal is high fat content, really high protein content, because it takes way too long to digest. Mm. So, the chances of you having cramping or feeling bloated during your workout are quite high if you're having those types of foods. Mm-hmm. But what you're doing is great, right? So just, a banana, really easily, quickly digested, a little bit of yogurt, that works perfect. Yeah. You could do a piece of toast. You could do a little bit of like a peanut butter on it if you wanted. That gives you a little bit of protein with that carbohydrate. Yeah. Sometimes a drink is well tolerated for people. So like a smoothie is well tolerated and easily digested. The amount is going to matter though, right? You don't have that time. Yeah. You just want to be careful. And sometimes liquids don't jive with people. So these are all things that you want to be looking at, so even during like say if you were going into a competition, during a training period. So, we always say like 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour of activity. Mm-hmm. Well, that could come in a ton of different forms. It could come in food form. It could come in gels or it could come in drinks. Right. But those are all things that people don't tolerate the same, right? So you've got to try all that out. But for yourself, I think you're doing a great thing. And if that works for you, so that's always the question we have to ask. How do I feel, right? Yeah. I feel pretty good. If you were to do eggs, I bet you're not going to feel good because it's going to take too long for you to digest those. But, John, you might want to try some different things too and say, okay, what if I try, I don't know, an apple? Does that make me feel different? An apple with peanut, well, you can't have nuts. Sorry. Soy nut butter.
Allergies are always the real challenge too.
Always a challenge.
With nuts and seeds being at least one of the official ways to get a little bit of extra protein and maybe even some healthy fats, those are out of the question for me. So, I wind up struggling to find some alternatives.
Right. Do you like avocado?
It's all right. I can't say that I'm an avocado lover, though.
Okay. Have you ever had it in a smoothie?
No.
Okay. So
at least not that I'm aware of. It could have been in one of the long laundry list of ingredients that I just didn't notice.
Right. So that's a great way to have avocado because you can disguise it and it makes your smoothie creamy if you like that.
Right.
And you can buy frozen avocado now, which is really nice. So there's lots of ways, but that's just something, a fruit that comes to mind that has some great healthy fat. But even just using oils. So your olive oil and canola oil, they also give you healthy fat. So if you look at the new dyslipidemia guidelines, I know I've referred to those, but they're heart health guidelines.
Right.
They talk about having a quarter a cup of olive oil a day, which sounds very odd to people because we've been so fat phobic for so long. But now we're seeing the benefits of healthy fats into our diet. And they do play a role in keeping us full longer, which is so important. So you could look at different oils as well. Like soy nuts as well. No. Okay, you can't have those?
I've never tried them.
Okay, yeah. Well,
not sure.
Don't take my advice. I want you in a clinical setting before we try this. But there's lots of different ways you can get this in. And then, of course, fatty fish is not a plant source of fat, but amazing for omega-3 fat and something we should be eating a couple times a week right to get in.
Now, the supplements are certainly a component that a lot of us look at for lack of a better alternative. I mean, if we're not able to get fish fats into our diet, whether, like in my case, I have a mild allergy to certain fish, but not all of them. So I really could easily get it into my diet.
Yes.
But the rest of my family isn't crazy about fish, so we hardly ever have it. Okay. So as a result, I'm taking omega-3s as a supplement. Do those over-the-counter supplements that are intended to replace those components of your diet achieve the same thing, or should you really be aspiring to include those naturally in your diet?
That's a great question. So I think it's the perfect question for a pharmacist because that's our expertise. But if I could give you my opinion on it, we know that supplements don't sometimes act the same as food. Omega-3 is an example where we would recommend that supplement for people that didn't eat fish to help their heart health, let's say. Well, it's not recommended anymore to help, lower LDL cholesterol. It can help lower triglycerides, which is another component.
Right.
But, to take it to lower LDL, no. So the short answer to that is I think it's better to eat the food if you can, right? If you can't, then absolutely you need to talk about that with your pharmacist, with your dietitian to make sure that things are driving well.
Or just browbeat my family into eating fish.
Definitely. Right? Or you have it when they're not here, right? If they're not here in the day, you have it for lunch, look at canned options or frozen options, but things that are, easy for you to get them in. I don't know if your parents ever meal planned like this, but I know my husband's did, but they always used to have fish on Friday and they used to have beans on Monday and they used to have, so just like his mom, Michael's mother would meal plan. So, every Monday they had baked beans.
Right.
So it made it easy for her. She had 10 kids. She was home.
There's a reason to meal plan.
There's
right
a
there.
reason. I'm telling you, I think she could have taught meal planning, but we've gotten away from that. And there's some real value to having those kind of theme nights. So whether it's Taco Tuesday or it doesn't matter, whatever works for your family. But that's a really good way to get started with meal planning because meal planning is so daunting to a lot of people. But it's having that plan on your fridge. It's making everybody aware. If you've got teenagers, if you've got, spouses, everybody can kind of pitch in, right? Yeah. But everybody's on the same page. But having those theme nights and then having, at least a fish night or two a week is a great thing to do.
That's been the real challenge, at least from my perspective anyway. And I think part of it is that I've kind of trained myself to not want to commit to eating certain things days out.
Right. You're one of those.
It'd be nice if I could approach it differently. And I see a lot of people at the gym that are really specifically doing like an entire week worth of meal planning. They'll do meal prep. They'll dice up all the vegetables and the meats and cook everything all at the same time. And then they have the discipline to put it into containers with properly sized bins that have to do with the proportions that they're supposed to have. I haven't taken it to that step yet.
Right.
And I feel like maybe I should be if I want to be able to achieve a higher level of performance. Mm-hmm. But that also means that I'd have to go through a little bit more of an education process on what those proportions need to be, and exercise a little bit of imagination on how I can get all the ingredients that I need and still have my meals not feel the same every time.
Right. It's tough. So, let's talk about that. Meal is the same. So my advice to people, a lot of my clients that are looking to, so it's not your case, but say lose weight, is to eat the same things for a little while to get a handle on, okay, am I feeling full? Do I need more food? Do I need less food? How does this feel to me? Am I going to start seeing results? And then once we start to see results, maybe we work in some different things. For you, how do you start this? Do you go buy a rotisserie chicken at Sobeys? You cut that up into 4 meals, and then you put, 4 different veg with that, 4 different starch with that. That would be an easy way to start, right? You can buy packaged salads. You can put those in. So, do you have to really put those in containers? No, you work from home. You can have it in your fridge. But, there's lots of different ways you can go about this to make it easy. But you're right, that same old can get monotonous. But sometimes it's what you have for dinner, you have for lunch the next day. Right? So, or if you had, a chicken stir fry for dinner and you put it in a wrap the next day. So there's ways to kind of make one meal go a couple of different ways, which I think is so important with meal planning. None of us have the time, to really cook 2 to 3 meals a day, right? So always thinking of how your meals could do double duty. And then, having stuff frozen. That saves me. Having 2 kids, having a husband, I have stuff in the freezer all the time so that I can pull that out, and then think simple. Eggs, great source of protein, right? It's easy.
Yeah, and we often forget about the cost efficiency of doing meal planning in that way as well.
Yes.
If you're making each meal individually, you're spending more on your ingredients, you're spending more on more time on prep. So whether you equate that into a cost, at least in terms of time, these are all efficiencies that we all lose when we don't have prioritize that planning for the entire week.
You got it.
And that's certainly something that I've been thinking about. My wife has been thinking about it a little bit more than I have. And she's gone through bouts where an entire week of meals were planned. But we also get the occasional bomb thrown in there, like, suddenly an appointment gets changed, or there's basketball right in the middle of the time that we would ordinarily eat. And so, and the biggest challenge is our family doesn't all like the same stuff. Right. So if we were trying to do meal planning that everyone would eat the same thing, we'd be in very serious trouble. So that becomes a little bit challenging. My wife and I will commonly eat the same thing, but it certainly can't say that of our 14-year-old.
Right.
And our oldest is only here for meals on occasion, especially now that she's working shift work. So there's no way to integrate the planning maybe the way that I think a family with a kind of different schedule would be able to do.
Right.
But I'd certainly like to get to that level, because I think that it would make a world of a difference to just our approach.
Totally.
And, we're Costco members, so it's not like we can't come home with a ton of ingredients for a reasonable price. And
you just said a bad word. I'm just kidding. And so here's a suggestion for you too. So I do this all the time with my family. So you sit down together, the 3 of you, let's say, so the 4 of you when you're all here, but and then you pick the meals that you all like, right? So there's got to be 5 meals. There's got to be 6 meals that off the top of my head, I'd find it very hard. But go on. But this might be useful for your listeners. But even just put them in a cup. Like write them on pieces of paper, put them in a cup. So sometimes it can just be as easy as that, right? So in the morning, it's Tuesday morning. I pick out. Okay, we're having chili tonight, right? Yep. The morning is sometimes tough. It depends on who's home and who can get things ready. Or maybe it's the night before that we can prep things. But it can sometimes be that easy, right? So yes, we can do a full, 5 days of meal planning. But sometimes it could be just a couple days in a row, right? And when we know we're all going to be here at the same time, we go to our cup of common meals and we choose one of those.
Right.
there's lots of ways it can be done, but you're right. You got to make it work for your family, and every family is so different, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So what of the myth that when you walk into the typical grocery store, if you stay to the exterior walls, you get all the healthy food and all the crap is in the middle? Does that actually wind up being the case?
I mean, I don't think we can say that 100% of the time. So yes, you get your produce on the outskirts. You get your, animal protein, your fish. Your dairy's usually on the outskirts, and your grain, your bread, really.
Yeah.
But in the aisles, I can find beans and lentils.
That's true.
So paleos aren't going to like this, but I mean, they're definitely nutritious, right? Yeah. We want to be including those. We can choose whole grain pasta, not for you, but nuts and seeds are in the aisles. So, you got to be smart about your options. You have to learn how to read a label. You have to learn how to read a label.
Yeah.
So that's something. I'll do a plug for Sobeys here. Our dietitians do free grocery store tours, across the country. We're national now.
Okay.
So that's something that, everybody should invest an hour time in and get a little bit of education in that, because it's different, right? Yep. Or you say to the dietitian, this is the cereal that I choose. Can you tell me if this is good for fiber? Is it good? And we can look at those, and we can look at some other options. But so yes, I don't think that's true all the time, because there are things that are in those aisles that are really nutritious. But sometimes we just kind of get our blinders on and we buy the same thing week after week. Right. So sometimes it's a matter of just shaking that up a bit. Yeah. And there's so many resources out there to help us. Right?
Yeah. I think the main things that we've started staying away from in particular would be, certainly like chips and stuff like that. I'm just trying to stay the hell away from. Yeah. Occasionally at parties, and that's about the only time they make an appearance.
Yes.
But even simple things that, like, as kids we were told were healthy, like cereals and stuff. Even Raisin Bran has a ton of sugar in it.
Right.
So unless you look at the label, you wouldn't really think of that, because they hold these things up as being healthy.
Right.
Crackers and things like that are extremely high in carbs and don't necessarily deliver a whole lot else.
Right.
And you never wind up just having one. You wind up with half a bloody package at
Right.
once. So, those types of things I wind up making a concerted effort to avoid. I'm tending to buy, fresh meats and stuff that I have to prepare the same day kind of thing, which I probably could cook and freeze. I just haven't gotten into the habit of doing that.
That's right. So yeah, I like your thought process there. So whole foods, definitely. They're always going to be better for us. Home prepared, always better for us, always less sodium, so we get a lot of different conversations about packaged foods here. But yes, if you can buy your food, make it yourself, you're going to save money. If we are planning properly and we're not throwing food out, we can definitely save money that way too, which I know is a concern for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it just takes some time, some education, finding the plan that works for you. And sometimes that is, here's the 5 meals that we like. We're going to rotate those for a couple weeks, maybe in some different ways, but until we kind of get our groove.
Yeah.
And then we add a couple more meals to that repertoire. And maybe then we have like a week 1 menu, a week 2 menu. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it.
Well, and on the surface, as boring as it might sound to eat the same food for a period of time, there is something scientifically valid about it as well. When you do eat the same thing for, however many days or even weeks at a time, you do get a measurable, observable result as to how it impacts how you feel on a day-to-day basis. Right. If you're, the idea of having a different meal every day means you're constantly changing the variables that you're then trying to gauge against your performance in the gym.
Right.
And so I think I understand why those that are doing the meal planning do have certain ingredients and certain, or even certain entire meals that repeat within their overall schedule, whether it's the same meal several days in a row or that certain meal appears at the same time of week.
That's right.
Week over week, so that they have something that they can compare as time goes on.
That's right. Yeah. And of course, in that equation always goes sleep, stress.
Yeah.
Which can always affect everything, right?
Yeah, lots of other variables going in there too.
But you're right, having that consistency, and sometimes it helps people just get on track, right? Because sometimes just mere choice, like I've said before, it just can be too much sometimes, right? So, if we're just starting this process, sometimes having the same couple meals that you rotate through for maybe lunch or supper can really help get you on the right track to start. Especially if you're putting in the effort to work out. That's the thing, right? That takes a lot of time. That's a lot of effort. It's commendable. And if you're not seeing the results you're looking for, you got to start trying some different things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the diet is probably overlooked by most of us when we first start. I mean, we just think, hey, we're suddenly going from 0 to 100. We're suddenly very active. Everything else will just kind of sort itself out.
Right.
But the reality is, you do have to fuel the engine a different way as well if you're going to expect results. Or at the very least, you're going to get better results if you're putting the right fuel into you.
Well, they say it's 80 to 90% nutrition, right? They say abs are made in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So it really is dependent on what we eat. There is a science behind it. That being said, there's lots of ways to approach eating now that we need to be open to as dietitians, because not every diet works the same for every person. Or I like to say eating plan. I don't like to say a diet, but you got to work within that, right? And so,
do you get a lot of questions about the various different trendy diets that wind up appearing? I mean, I got to figure you wind up having to swat down those flies on a regular basis.
Definitely. But I just presented at the Pharmacy Association of Nova Scotia conference a couple weekends ago. And that was the underlying theme is, we have to work with our clients where they're at. So if they come to me and they want to do keto, well, I was just at the Diabetes Canada conference a couple weeks ago, and some people with diabetes are seeing results. They're seeing good blood sugar control. The evidence is not all in yet, and I have to be honest with my clients, right? But I have to also support them. Now, as a community dietitian, that's not really my role. I have clinical dietitians that, and colleagues that, in that team approach would be better to support, because you do want to look at blood work.
Right.
But if I have someone coming to me for paleo, yes, I can absolutely help them, depending on what their goals are, right? So, it's about education. It's about meeting people where they're at. And of course, as we know, nutrition changes day by day.
Yeah.
So, it's about keeping abreast of that. And, why can I eat eggs every day now? Why don't eggs affect my cholesterol anymore, right?
Yeah, there has been there's certain foods that have had a very significant shift, and eggs is certainly one of them.
Totally, right? So, people get frustrated with that, and they seem to they think we lose credibility sometimes, because they think, oh, you just said this last week and now you're saying something different. But as we know, science changes all the time. So just to be abreast of that. So, just like you have a good doctor, like you have a good pharmacist, you should have a good dietitian that you can at least call upon, ask questions, and then you make your own informed decision on how you want to roll out your food, right? That's it. Yeah.
What's your suggestion for the busy person that needs to at least dip their toe into the notion of meal planning? Like, is it starting with those certain days of the week you have something repeat to make things a little bit easier to start?
I would, yeah. So I sometimes look at my clients and that everybody has 3 to 4 go-to meals. And sometimes I work with those, right? They feel comfortable cooking them. And then we just try those. And then I might help to introduce some different recipes that are one-pot meals or slow cooker if they like those. Or it's the egg meal that we talked about where, I don't have 3 pots on the stove every night, So it is starting slow and looking at where they're at and then building on that. So, if they're having the 7-ounce steak with, a half a cup of peas, well, we try to balance that plate out a little bit and work within that, right? So there's always little changes that we can be making all the time. But sometimes it's a suggestion of, okay, go buy a vegetable tray.
Yeah.
Yes, it's more expensive, but you know what? If it helps, sometimes people are willing to put that in just to kind of get them there, right? I mean, if you go buy a thing of celery and you don't cut it up and put it in clear containers in eye view in your fridge, we know that it rots in that crisper. Yeah. And we throw it out week after week. Yeah. You have to prepare things as they come home and make it easy to eat. So if that means buying a small vegetable tray or already prepared vegetables, we do that, right? So it's those little tricks of the trade that can help you increase your consumption of those foods, which in turn affect our nutrition. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Making it easy.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Laurie, thank you.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Time to eat. I know I have a stronger desire to plan my meals effectively to improve what I get back out of what I eat. It's a complex subject because there are a lot of variables to control. When you're into fitness as a lifestyle, I guess that comes with the territory, but for some reason a lot of us, myself certainly included, think of nutrition as part of the equation that's mysterious and challenging in a way that I don't normally equate with my workouts. But like anything, experiment, fail, learn, and improve. that has to be the way to go, and I'm going to make more of an effort to apply that thinking to what I eat. If you haven't caught Laurie on CTV Morning Live, be sure to tune in every second Wednesday morning for her segment. You can also follow her on Twitter. Her handle is @RDLaurie, and Laurie is spelled Laurie. And you can check out her website at justasklaurie.com for more discussion on nutrition and some great recipes for healthy meals and snacks. Please subscribe to the Box Jumper podcast on your favorite podcasting platform so you get upcoming episodes automatically as I'm joined by more guests to talk about fitness and health. If you like this episode, please write me a review on iTunes. It's very much appreciated, and it helps other folks like you find the podcast. You can email me feedback or ideas at info@boxjumper.ca, and of course you can visit the website, boxjumper.ca, for more fitness-related stuff. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook with the handle @boxjumperover40. Thanks for listening. Lots more to come in the coming weeks. Until then, stay healthy, WOD happy, and WOD often.